Hi, I'm Larkin. And for 6 years, I raised a little girl who wasn't even mine, without knowing it. My sister Vera called me worthless behind my back, and then took everything I built, my husband, my child, even my place in the family. Everyone around me played along, smiling at brunches while rewriting my life in whispers. They let me believe I was the mother, the wife, the daughter. But what do you do when you realize you've been edited out of your own story? Would you stay silent? Or burn it all down to reclaim your name? The day began with sunlight pouring through the kitchen window, lighting up the counter where I'd laid out cupcakes, party favors, and balloons the night before. I'd been up since 5 a.m., icing everything myself. Pink with gold sprinkles, just how Annika liked it. She turned 6 today. It mattered to me that she felt seen, that she remembered this day as hers. Ours. Devlin had offered to help the night before but disappeared into his office, saying he needed to prep a client case. Vera showed up around 10, unannounced, like always, breezing in with a smile and a bouquet bigger than the child it was meant for. "I figured you'd need help," she said, already taking over the setup like she lived here. I bit my tongue. The backyard was already trimmed and cleaned, the tables decorated, chairs rented, but she still moved like she was saving me from a mess. I let her. I was used to letting things slide for the sake of not arguing. Guests arrived slowly. Friends from Annika's school, some cousins, a few of Devlin's co-workers. Vera played hostess better than I ever could. She fluttered from group to group, smiling, laughing like a woman with no secrets. Devlin stood next to her, arms crossed, content to let her run the show. I stayed mostly near the grill, making sure food came out hot. I didn't mind, not at first. I liked being behind the scenes. Until they cut the cake. Everyone gathered around the patio table. The lid came off the cake box, and there it was, written in looping pink letters. "Happy birthday, Annika Love, Daddy and Vera." I blinked. Surely it was a mistake. A bakery slip? Some weird joke? But then I heard Annika squeal, "Thank you, Mommy Vera and Daddy!" Laughter rippled through the crowd. I couldn't move. I stared at the frosting, my own name missing from the one thing I had planned for weeks. Devlin looked down at his phone. Vera gave me a wink and leaned into the crowd, hugging Annika. Cameras flashed. I swallowed something hard and smiled at whoever was watching. Nobody noticed what I didn't say. Later, as the sun dipped behind the fence, and guests trickled out with leftovers and balloon strings, I stood in the kitchen loading the dishwasher. My hands moved mechanically. Devlin stepped in, drying his hands with a towel he hadn't used. "Don't read into it," he said, voice casual. The cake was Vera's idea. She wanted to surprise Annika. I closed the dishwasher. So the surprise was leaving me off my daughter's birthday cake? She didn't mean anything by it. You know how Vera is. She's enthusiastic. Enthusiastic? She called herself Annika's mommy, in front of everyone. He shrugged. "You're overthinking this." I didn't reply. I grabbed my phone from the counter. Vera had texted, "Don't be so sensitive, it was just a joke. The kids loved it." That night, Annika climbed into my bed, exhausted and sugar-drunk, her hair smelling like frosting and sunscreen. She curled up beside me and whispered, "Mommy Vera said I'm her little girl now, too." My throat tightened. I kissed her forehead, tucked the blanket tighter. She fell asleep within minutes. I lay there holding her tiny hand in mine, staring at the ceiling. The room was quiet, but my thoughts were deafening. My phone buzzed. A missed call from Vera. Then a voicemail. "We had such a blast today. I hope she never forgets who made her day special." I didn't play it again. I didn't need to. I lay still, not sure whether I had just imagined the whole thing, or finally started seeing the truth. I woke up before the sun did. The silence in the house was dense, almost rehearsed. Devlin had already left, his side of the bed cold and neatly folded. I sat up, still in yesterday's clothes, and stared at the half-inflated balloons clinging to the ceiling in the hallway. From where I was, the party felt like a dream I had no control over, a play I watched from backstage. Annika was still asleep, tangled in her pink unicorn sheets. I didn't want to wake her. Instead, I made coffee and opened my phone, trying to distract myself. The first thing on my feed was Vera's latest post. "Another perfect day with family," it said, followed by hearts and sparkles. There she was, Vera, grinning wide beside Devlin and Annika, who sat on her lap mid-giggle, frosting on her nose. The photo had that filtered, airbrushed glow she loved to use. I wasn't in a single frame, not even a blurry elbow in the background. It looked like I hadn't been there at all. The comments stung more than I expected. Annika looks so happy with you two. What a beautiful family. You and Devlin make parenting look effortless. No one asked where the actual mother was. No one noticed my absence. I scrolled further and found a candid from the party, Vera holding the cake with Devlin by her side. I must have been in the kitchen then, plating hot dogs. I remembered sweating in silence while they were out there, posing like magazine parents. Before I could think about it too long, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was the family group chat. A voice message popped up, from Vera. The waveform wobbled for a few seconds, and then her voice filled the room. I mean, come on, Larkin still acts like she's some perfect mom. But we all know how fragile she is. That kid needs someone stable, not someone who falls apart every time a balloon pops. Silence. The message had clearly not been meant for us. There was no apology, no follow-up, just the long pause after exposure. I could feel my stomach turn. I saved the message quietly, like storing a knife in my coat pocket. A minute later, Devlin finally responded, "Let's not start drama." Drama. That word had followed me for years. Any time I voiced discomfort, frustration, pain, it was drama. When Vera mocked me or stepped over boundaries, it was a joke. When I cried, it was being sensitive. I was beginning to realize that drama was just a label to keep me quiet. By late afternoon, I called Vera. She answered with that sing-song voice she reserved for when she knew she'd crossed a line but didn't plan to own it. "Oh, hey, was just about to call you. Isn't that cake moment going viral?" Vera, the voice message, I heard it. A pause, just long enough to register her calculation. "Oh, that? Don't be so serious, I was just venting to Mom. You know how sometimes things slip, don't take it so personally. You said I'm not stable, that Annika needs someone better than me. I never said better, just reliable. Look, Lark, you've been through a lot. We're all just trying to help. Help? Help by pretending I don't exist?" I didn't say anything else, just hung up. Later that evening, Eloise texted me. "Your sister means well. Don't escalate this, Larkin." I stared at the message for a long time. The words blurred, then sharpened again. I typed and deleted a dozen replies, but in the end, I didn't answer. Instead, I sat in Annika's room while she slept. I looked around at the drawings taped to her walls, rainbows, stars, a stick figure family that once had 3 people. Lately, it had 4. The latest one had only 2, Vera and Devlin, no me. I wasn't being paranoid. I wasn't emotional. I was being erased. Saturday came with gray skies and soft drizzle, the kind of weather that made Oregon feel like it was always holding its breath. Annika had an art exhibit at school, a casual event for families, nothing formal, just construction paper masterpieces and finger-painted galaxies. She clutched my hand as we walked into the multi-purpose room, her rain boots squeaking with each step. The smell of crayons and wet coats hung in the air. Parents huddled in clumps, pointing at drawings, taking photos, sipping burnt coffee from tiny paper cups. We made our way to the wall marked, "First grade, my family." I spotted Annika's name scrawled in red crayon beneath a large poster board. There were photographs glued across the top, stick figures drawn in below. I smiled, ready to see us frozen in her little world. But when I got closer, my stomach dropped. There she was, Annika, in the center, her 2 front teeth missing in her wide smile. To her left, Vera, with her perfect curls and pearl earrings. To her right, Devlin, mid-laugh, arm draped casually over Vera's shoulder. No me. The space where I thought I should have been was filled with a glittery foam heart. It felt like a joke, or worse, an edit. "Such a sweet photo, huh?" a voice said beside me. I turned. It was her teacher, Mrs. Hughes. She smiled, oblivious. "Annika always talks about how Aunt Vera and Daddy are there for everything, that kind of support. It shows." I nodded, unable to form words. My mouth moved, but nothing came out. Annika tugged my sleeve. "Mommy, can we go see the rockets now?" I followed her through the maze of art projects, but my mind stayed stuck on that board. I couldn't stop replaying it. Devlin's hand on Vera's shoulder. The way Annika's drawing underneath showed the three of them holding hands with a sun above their heads. No fourth figure. No me. That evening after dinner, Annika lay on the rug coloring while I folded laundry. The TV was on low, something animated humming in the background. I sat beside her and tried to keep my tone even. "Sweetheart, your project today? It was beautiful." She nodded, still coloring. "I noticed I wasn't in the photo. Why didn't you include me?" She didn't look up. "Because you're always busy or tired. Aunt Vera picks me up from school sometimes, and she helped with the poster." I swallowed. "I see." She said it's okay that families change. I turned my face away for a moment, pretending to adjust the stack of towels. My hands trembled slightly, and I curled them into fists inside the fabric. After Annika went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the sugar jar. The house was quiet again, except for the occasional hum of the fridge. I thought about when Vera and I were little. How every school recital, every family dinner, she was always in the center, front of the photo, favorite at the table. And me? I was the one asked to take the picture, or to keep quiet when she had one of her moods. Mom would say, "Just let it go, Larkin. She needs more attention than you do." Or worse, "Don't provoke her. You know how she is." Back then, it was easy to believe I was overreacting, that maybe I was the problem. But now, it wasn't just me being left out of a picture. It was my daughter being told I didn't belong in hers. I opened the family photo album we kept in the living room. The early pages were full. Me holding Annika in the hospital, her first bath, Devlin looking at her like she was a miracle. I flipped further. Somewhere around her 4th birthday, I started fading from the frames. More shots of Devlin and Vera, more of Annika at Vera's condo, less of me. I hadn't noticed it until now. They'd started erasing me slowly, subtly. I closed the album and whispered to the dark kitchen, "You may cut me from your pictures, Vera, but you will not cut me from her life." That was the moment I stopped hoping things would fix themselves. I began looking not just for answers, but for proof. Monday morning came and went with the usual rhythm. Coffee brewed, lunch packed, a kiss on Annika's forehead before school. But inside something had shifted. I no longer floated through my day hoping to keep peace. I moved with quiet purpose, like a woman tracing the source of a leak in her roof, knowing it had been dripping longer than she dared admit. By late afternoon, after finishing up some work calls, I pulled down the storage bins from the closet in our home office. They held our tax files, rental agreements, baby keepsakes, years of documents Devlin never looked through but insisted on keeping just in case. I sat on the carpeted floor, legs crossed, fingers digging through envelopes, folders, anything labeled with Annika's name. And there it was, a thumb drive tucked into a file labeled Legal Annika. Something about the label struck me wrong. I plugged it into my laptop, heart already pounding before I clicked anything. The folder opened slowly, my screen old, too full of photos and files. Inside were PDFs, some hospital documents, immunization records, and then one titled Paternity Confirmation, March 2019. I clicked it. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Medical jargon, lab letterhead. Then my eyes landed on 2 names. Vera Maddox, biological mother. Devlin Maddox, alleged father, positive match. It felt like time fractured. I sat there, blinking at the screen, trying to process how long this truth had existed in my home without my knowledge. The date on the file was weeks before our wedding, which meant they both knew. Before vows were exchanged, before Annika called me mommy for the first time, before I ever agreed to share a life with either of them. They knew. This wasn't an affair of the heart. It was deception by design. I closed the laptop and stared at the wall. Every memory began unraveling in my mind. The business trip Vera took after Annika was born, the one Devlin insisted she needed because she was stressed. He had coddled her for weeks afterward, saying she was fragile. I thought it was postpartum depression. I thought it was sisterhood. Turns out it was guilt. I pulled the report from the printer and read the line again. Black ink on white paper, sharp as glass. I never screamed. I didn't throw anything. I didn't cry. I stood up, tucked the printed report into a folder, and walked it calmly to the locked drawer where we kept passports and insurance documents. Then I returned to the laptop, downloaded every message, photo, and document I could find tied to Annika, especially the ones that quietly removed me from her life. I backed them up in 2 places. By evening, Devlin was home. He kissed the top of my head like he always did and asked, "Everything okay today?" I looked him straight in the eye and said, "Yeah, I got a lot done." He didn't notice the change, or maybe he did, but chose to ignore it. That had become his skill. Strategic blindness. After dinner, I washed dishes while Annika played in the living room. Devlin sat on the couch, watching some mindless sitcom like nothing in the world was shifting beneath his feet. Then my phone buzzed. Vera. "Hey, you free to chat tomorrow? Annika wants to stay over this weekend." I stared at the screen, fingers numb. She had no idea I knew, no clue the facade was cracking. I typed slowly. "Sure, let's talk." I wasn't ready to burn bridges, but I was done pretending they weren't already on fire. Vera arrived 15 minutes late, as if to remind me whose time mattered. She didn't knock. She tapped once and opened the door like she'd done it her whole life. Maybe she had. Some habits are hard to kill. She wore a tailored beige coat, scarf loose around her neck like a magazine cover woman on an effortless Sunday. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "I brought cinnamon rolls," she chirped, holding up a bakery bag. I didn't smile back. "Tea?" She followed me into the kitchen. I poured water into the kettle and set it on the stove. My hands didn't shake. I was done shaking. We sat at the dining table. I placed 2 mugs down, then slid a plain manila folder across the surface toward her. She hesitated, then opened it. Her face didn't twitch at the sight of the report. She read silently, blinking once. "I see you've been digging," she said evenly. "I see you've been hiding," I replied. Vera didn't flinch. "We had our reasons, Lark. You weren't exactly in a good place back then." "Don't," I cut in. "Don't rewrite the story. You weren't protecting me. You were positioning yourself." She sat straighter. "You were barely functioning when Annika was born. You cried in the kitchen for weeks. We were worried." "You think worry justifies stealing motherhood?" "It's not stealing if you never had the claim." I stood, walked to the credenza, and took out a second folder. I opened it, pulled out a printed transcript, and placed a small recorder on the table. I hit play. Devlin's voice filled the room. "If it ever comes up, we can claim it was just an oversight. Legally, Vera has a stronger position anyway. Larkin's fragile. No court would fight us on it." Click. Vera's color didn't change, but her jaw tightened. "You've been recording us?" "I recorded one conversation," I said. "One you both never thought I'd hear." She crossed her arms. "That doesn't change anything." "It changes everything," I said, my tone low and steady. "You've manipulated my child. You forged a family narrative where I was the unstable one, the ghost in my own home." "I stepped in where you fell short," she snapped. I leaned forward, voice still calm. "No, you stepped over me. There's a difference." She stood. "You're not fit to raise a child that isn't even yours." And yet, I've been doing it. Day by day, meal by meal, nightmare by nightmare. I didn't need biology to love her. Vera's mouth twitched. "You think love will matter in court?" I stood too. "I think truth will. And truth is, you don't get to play mother when it suits you and disappear when it doesn't." She paced toward the door. "So what now, Lark? You planning to erase me from Annika's life? Pretend I was never there?" "No," I said. "I'm not erasing you. I'm drawing a boundary. You will not see her without my consent. You will not enroll her, pick her up, take her to brunch, post her online, or call her yours. One more step out of line, and I will take legal action." She turned, eyes narrow. "You just declared war on your own blood." I didn't blink. "Then I'll bleed with my head held high." Vera slammed the door on her way out. I didn't flinch. I didn't know how far she'd go, but I had just seen how far I could go too. The invitation came through a group text. Eloise was hosting Sunday brunch for the family. "Nothing special," she said. "Just food, a few updates, and an opportunity to celebrate the people who show up." Her exact words. I read the message twice before deciding what I'd bring. It wouldn't be a casserole. That morning, I dressed in a navy sweater and dark jeans. Simple, intentional. I printed the DNA report again, placed it neatly in an envelope, and tucked the flash drive into my purse. It was time. By the time I arrived, the living room was already full. Vera laughed loudly in the kitchen, flipping pancakes like she owned the place. Devlin stood near the coffee machine, chatting with my cousin about youth soccer leagues. My parents floated in and out of conversation, light and warm as if nothing had fractured. "Larkin, sweetie!" Eloise greeted me with a kiss on the cheek, her eyes scanning my hands. "No dish today?" "Just me," I replied. "Hope that's enough." She laughed politely. "Of course." Brunch moved slowly. Scrambled eggs, fruit platters, family stories repeated for the third or fourth time. I waited. Halfway through, Eloise cleared her throat and clinked her mimosa glass. "Before we wrap up," she said, "I just want to acknowledge two people who have shown remarkable consistency in Annika's life. Devlin, of course, and Vera, who's always gone above and beyond." Applause, smiles. My chest thudded once, low and steady. "I'd like to say something too," I said, standing. They turned. Not all eyes were friendly. I walked to the TV and plugged in the flash drive. The file was named simply, "For the Family." "Please, just watch." The screen lit up. The living room quieted. Devlin's voice came through first. "If it ever comes up, we can claim it was just an oversight. Legally, Vera has a stronger position anyway. Larkin's fragile. No court would fight us on it." Gasps. Someone dropped a fork. The next voice was Vera's. "I know she'll fall apart if she finds out. That's why we need to act like this was always the plan." I let the silence sit for a moment after the recording ended. Then I clicked to the second file, the DNA report. The words were simple, clinical, undeniable. Biological mother, Vera Maddox. I turned around slowly. Devlin looked pale. Vera's smile had vanished. My mother stared at the TV as if it might start speaking again. Harlan, my father, had gone very still. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just said, "I was the one up at 3 a.m. when Annika had fevers. I was the one packing her lunches, attending her conferences, tucking her into bed. You lied to me. You let me build a life on a fault line you created." Vera stood suddenly. "This is disgusting. You're trying to destroy this family in front of strangers." "These aren't strangers," I said. "They're relatives. And if you weren't ashamed of what you did, you wouldn't mind them knowing." Devlin opened his mouth, but Harlan finally spoke. "We've all let this go too far." That shut everyone up. "I'm not picking sides," he added, looking at me, then at Vera. "But I won't pretend this didn't happen, not anymore." I nodded and stepped away from the TV. I will no longer be edited out of my own life. I didn't wait for permission to leave. I gathered my purse, offered a quiet goodbye to my aunt near the door, and stepped out into the crisp afternoon. Just as I reached my car, Eloise followed me out. "You didn't have to shame your family like that." I turned to face her. "You didn't have to let them lie to me for 6 years." She said nothing. If that brunch was war, then Vera's next move would be a siege. 3 days passed after the brunch. No one called, no one checked in. Silence had replaced every polite nod and backhanded compliment I used to navigate through family gatherings. And then the silence broke, with a knock on the door and a delivery slip that made my stomach drop. I signed for the envelope. Thick, formal, printed with the emblem of a law firm I'd never heard of. I didn't open it right away. I stared at it for a while on the kitchen counter like it might set itself on fire and vanish. But eventually, I sat down, took a breath, and slid it open. Inside were 10 neatly stapled pages. A motion filed on behalf of Vera Maddox, claiming she should be granted primary parental authority over Annika, based on her biological standing and consistent role in the child's life. The language was sharp, clinical. There was no mention of betrayal, no trace of the deceit. Just clean lines of legalese trying to erase 6 years of mothering with one signature. Attached at the back was a copy of an amended estate plan, my mother's. Eloise had officially named Vera the child's principal guardian figure in case of her death, citing long-standing involvement and maternal care. Not once was my name mentioned. That night, I barely slept. My mind churned through every bedtime story, every scraped knee I'd kissed, every fever I'd stayed up with, and what it felt like to see them reduced to a footnote someone had chosen to omit. Morning came gray and damp. I dropped Annika off at daycare, gave her a kiss on the forehead, and walked in to update her file with new emergency contacts. The director, Miss Jennings, looked confused. "Oh, Vera already updated the file last week," she said, flipping through a folder. "She's listed as Annika's legal guardian." I felt my face freeze. "She's not. She said you authorized it." "I didn't. Remove her name immediately." Miss Jennings looked rattled, but nodded, scribbling a note. "I'm so sorry. We just assumed. She said it was temporary, but she had legal documents." "She didn't. And next time someone claims guardianship over my daughter, call me." My voice didn't rise, but it hit harder than yelling would have. I walked out calmly, but every cell in my body buzzed with rage. By the time I got home, I found Devlin already waiting on the porch, coffee in hand like he was staging some kind of intervention. "Larkin," he said before I even reached the door, "you're spiraling. You're making things harder than they need to be." "Harder for whom? For you? For Vera?" "You need to think rationally. There's no reason to throw lawyers into this. She's Annika's mother." "She's a liar," I shot back. "And so are you. You think I won't fight because I've always backed down before. That ends now." His face changed. Less confident, more calculating. "You're emotional. That's why this will backfire on you." I took a step closer. "You and Vera have rewritten history behind my back for years. I've been gathering every message, every photo, every document that proves the truth. So if this goes to court, and it will, I'll be ready. You thought I wouldn't fight if it got ugly. You were right. Until today." He opened his mouth, but I didn't wait. I walked inside, closed the door behind me, and called a custody attorney. "When they questioned my right to be her mother," I said softly into the receiver, "I questioned everything, until there was only truth left to show." The envelope came in the mail this time, certified, crisp, with my name typed too neatly on the front. I didn't flinch when I saw it. I'd been expecting this strike ever since I dared to push back. Inside, a petition from Devlin's attorney, formally requesting full legal custody of Annika. Grounds listed: emotional instability and non-biological relation. The words read like a slap wrapped in velvet. Elegant, cruel, predictable. I called my lawyer. "Let's give them the full story," I said. My voice didn't tremble. I was ready. The hearing was set for the following Thursday. That gave me 6 days to review every document, rewatch every recording, and gather every thread of the life they had tried to take from me. The night before court, I drove to my parents' house. I didn't knock. I still had a key. Eloise sat at the kitchen table, knitting something blue. Harlan was in his recliner, TV murmuring low behind him. "I'm going to court tomorrow," I said. "Devlin's suing for full custody." Neither of them moved. The clinking of Eloise's knitting needles was the only sound. "I thought you should know." She finally looked up. "Maybe it's time, Larkin." I blinked. "Time for what?" "To let go," she said flatly. "Blood raises blood. Vera may not have done it the right way, but Annika is hers." My father said nothing. It took every ounce of me to stay upright in that room. I nodded once, turned around, and walked out. That was the moment I stopped grieving for my mother. She had made her choice, and I had made mine. The next morning, the courtroom was cold and too bright. Devlin sat across the aisle in a navy suit that made him look respectable. Vera was beside him in beige, perfectly pressed. She didn't look at me. I sat with my lawyer, hands folded, a folder thick with documentation beside me. When the judge entered, the room hushed. Devlin's team went first. Their argument was rehearsed, clean, polished with lies. They painted me as emotionally unpredictable, distant, lacking biological standing. They used words like unfit and unstable without blinking. Then it was our turn. My lawyer stood and said, "We'd like to begin with a recording." She pressed play. Devlin's voice filled the courtroom again. "She's fragile. No court would fight us on it." The judge didn't flinch, but I saw her pen pause on the pad before her. We presented the falsified daycare documents, the forged emergency contacts, the estate plan with my name omitted. When it was over, I stood and spoke. "I may not share her DNA," I said, "but I've shared every morning, every bedtime, every first and every heartbreak. I've held her through nightmares, through stomach bugs, through the dark. I was her first word, her first hug, her first home. I am not perfect, but I have never abandoned her. I have never manipulated her. I have never used her to prove a point. The judge looked at both parties, and then she ruled. Legal custody would remain joint. Vera had no standing. I was granted legal recognition as Annika's psychological and primary caregiver. Devlin didn't speak. Vera stood up, heels clicking on the polished floor. As she walked past me, she whispered, "This isn't over." I turned my head just enough for her to hear me back. "It is for you." It was over for the court, but not yet for my heart. It's been 6 weeks since the hearing. The new rental sits at the edge of a quiet street just outside of Eugene. Not far enough to disappear, but far enough to breathe. The house is smaller, simpler. There's no manicured lawn or cathedral ceilings like the old place. But there's light. Soft morning light that streams into the kitchen when I make coffee, and amber dusk that rests on the windowsill when Annika colors after dinner. She comes over every other weekend now. The custody arrangement is clear, structured, peaceful in its way. On the Saturdays she's here, I slow everything down. No phones, no screens, no rush. We bake banana bread, build blanket forts, read the same 3 books in different voices until we both laugh. It's not perfect, but it's real. I no longer pretend to be whole. I'm not. There's grief stitched into my bones. Grief for the years I didn't know I was fighting for something already half stolen. But I've stopped trying to be everything. Now I just try to be here, fully. Last Sunday after bath time, Annika was brushing her hair in front of my mirror. She looked up, hesitating. "Mom," she said softly, "can I still call her Mommy Vera sometimes?" My chest tightened, but I didn't let it show. "You can call her whatever makes you feel safe," I told her. "But just know, I'll always be the one who stayed." She looked at me in the mirror for a long second, then nodded, returning to her hair like the question never happened. That night, as she slept, I sat on the floor beside her bed. A framed photo rested on the nightstand. Just her and me at the county fair last summer. I remember that day. The sun, the sticky lemonade, the way she laughed when cotton candy stuck to my nose. It was one of the last days before I learned the truth. Now, that photo sits where she can see it first thing every morning. Vera hasn't reached out since the ruling. Not even a text. A cousin mentioned she's under HR review at work for ethical concerns. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. Eloise hasn't said a word either. No apology, no acknowledgement. But last week, a small envelope arrived in the mail. No return address, just my name in my father's handwriting. Inside was a note. The one who stood alone always stood tallest. I'm sorry it took me this long to see it. I read it twice. I didn't cry. I folded it, placed it in the back of my journal, and didn't speak of it to anyone. Some scars don't vanish. They fade, maybe, soften. But they stay. Reminders of who we were when we were split open. Tonight, I sit at my desk after Annika's gone back to Devlin's. The house is quiet again. Not the cold silence of before, but one I've made space for. I open my journal and write a single line. She tried to erase me from a child's life, but I carved myself back in, word by word, act by act. Sometimes the deepest betrayals don't come from strangers. They come from the people who swore they'd never leave your side. And still, we rise. We gather the shattered pieces, not to pretend we're unbroken, but to rebuild into someone wiser, braver, more present. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that biology doesn't define family. Presence does. Loyalty does. Love that shows up every day, even when no one's watching, that's what makes someone a parent. Maybe you faced something like this. Maybe someone tried to rewrite your role in your own story. If so, what did you do? Did you stay silent or speak out? If this story touched your heart, type 1 in the comments or share where you're watching from. And if it didn't connect with you, tell me why. What would you have done differently? Make sure to subscribe to this channel if you want more stories that dig deep, stir something real, and remind us all that we're not alone.